An equation means nothing to me unless it expresses a thought of God by Srinivasa Ramanuja. Good afternoon, one and all, and a very heartily welcome to the webinar on singular value decomposition and its applications organized by Postgraduate Department of Mathematics, Sacred Heart College, Chalakudi. I'm Shani Burgess, first MSc student of Department of Mathematics, and I feel honored to welcome you all to this webinar in connection with National Mathematics Day celebrated as birthday of Srinivasa Ramanujan. In 2012, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh declared 22nd December as National Mathematics Day to recognize and celebrate works of Srinivasa Ramanujan. It is a mark of our tradition invoke the Almighty at the beginning of an important event.
We'll have a silent prayer. Shani, you can continue.
Thank you all. Let me first acknowledge the presence of our eminent guests. I would like to invite Mrs. Nida Davies, head the Department of Mathematics, to formally welcome the gathering.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Respected Principal of our college, Dr. Sister Irene, the very eminent resource person we are having today, Dr. Ashish Awasthi, and the fellow participants, a warm good afternoon to one and all. As said by Shani, this webinar is organized in connection with National Mathematics Day 2020. It is celebrated commemorating the birth centenary of the great mathematician of the era, Dr. Srinivasa Ramanujan. We have arranged a presentation on his life and works, but just a few words. He is a person who has inspired the mathematical fraternity of this country for years. His major contributions is towards number theory and analytical geometry. And since now, his collection of works has been studied in various branches of astrophysics, physics, chemistry, and various other branches other than mathematics. Till now, the applications is being found out. So now moving on to my duty, first of all, let me welcome our beloved principal, who is our constant motivator, Dr. Sister Irene, to this webinar. Sister.
Thank you. Thank you, Smita.
Now, it is our proud and privilege that we have such an esteemed guest among us, Dr. Ashish Awasthi. I'm very thankful to him that he accepted our invitation with such warmth. Thank you, sir, first of all, for accepting our invitation. He took the pain to interact with the mathematical community around him. He's such an eminent mathematician. He has done his PhD from IIT Kanpur and PDF from Austria. Today, I have only one thing to say to all the students present over here. Please interact with him. Make full usage of him. He is a person, as I know from his first doctoral student, Dr. Vijada Mukundan, who is our colleague. She always mentions about him as a person who is so warm, a person with so warmth and love, and a person who loves to interact with students. Students, please make full use of our resource person for the day. Now it's my turn to welcome all the participants. Thank you for being here and make a fruitful session. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. for your earnest welcome address. It is my pleasure to invite Dr. Sister Irene, our principal, to deliver the presidential address.
The respected chief guest of the day, Dr. Ashish sir, and the HOD of Mathematics Department, Ms. Smita, and the coordinator, Dr. Vijita ma'am, and other faculty members of mathematics department, and dear loving students of mathematics department. I feel very proud of the mathematics department because on this pandemic time, they are taking many initiatives to conduct many seminars and many things like that. And now, in connection with the National Mathematics Day, the mathematics department came forward to conduct this seminar, and their enthusiasm make me also very much enthusiastic, because compared to other departments, all the youngsters are in the mathematics department, and they all are very much cooperating and doing many wonderful things in the campus. So I take this opportunity, first of all, to congratulate HOD Smita ma'am and all other faculty members for conducting such a wonderful program. Hearty congratulations. And next, when I think of this program, I feel very proud that Dr. Ashish, who is coming from NIT, and he's a guide of PhD guide of our faculty, Dr. Vijita ma'am, and that is very much we are very proud of you, sir, for being in our campus. Even though it is the online meet, but this surely I believe that this will motivate all the students to come or to do wonderful things in the mathematics, or they'll be getting interested in doing research in mathematics. Because nowadays, when students come for interview, means for admission for graduation, when I ask about the subjects which you like, majority are telling that we don't like mathematics, physics, etc. Because the reason I understand that in the +2 time they got lot of things to study, so they are not, or the teachers are not making them to understand the subject, so that they are not loving the subject. So I used to tell them that once you come to, or once you join this graduation level, you'll be, first of all, you'll be loving the subject, because all the teachers are very much enthusiastic to making, or they will motivate you so much. And I see in the campus that the mathematics department students, especially the PG students, even the graduate students, they are coming up forward for participating many variety of competitions conducted in many other campuses. And because I believe that because of the motivation of the faculty members, and I strongly believe that this seminar conducted by this department surely make the students to love the subject mathematics, and they won't be, I think some are many of them are feared of the subject mathematics once they hear it. But I used to tell them that when you understand the subject, you will love the subject. And through this type of seminars, the students really must get motivated, and I believe that they will motivated surely by this type of seminars, because the resource person today is Dr. Ashish, as like our HOD Smita ma'am told, he like to interact with the students, and they'll become very friendly, and they'll understand that all the very good, very high positions, the person sitting in the high positions, they are very much humble and simple. And I believe that Dr. Ashish is like that, and sure, all my prideful wishes for this seminar to be a grand success, and new ventures. I am believing that mathematics department will come forward with other ventures in this academic year, and all my very best wishes for the seminar. Thank you.
Thank you, sister, for your motivating and inspiring words. Now, I would like to invite Ms. Rose Raju, our first MSc Mathematics student, for her presentation on Srinivasa Ramanujan, the man beyond infinity.
Good afternoon, all. Myself, Rose Raju. I'm here to talk to you about the great Indian mathematics prodigy, Sri Srinivasa Ramanujan, whose birth date is being celebrated as the National Mathematics Day. So, Vichita miss, I can't share my screen.
Why you just have tried now? Show the screen. Press that icon screen button there. What icon?
It is showing that I'm not the presenter.
Okay, 1 second. Okay, now it's fine.
Yes. So let me begin my presentation by asking you a question that who was Srinivasa Ramanujan and what made his contributions really extraordinary? Srinivasa Ramanujan was an Indian mathematician who made contributions to mathematical analysis, number theory, and continued fractions. What made his achievements really extraordinary was the fact that he received almost no formal trainings in pure mathematics and started working on his mathematical research in isolation. Moving on to his early childhood, he was born on December 22, 1887, in the town of Erode in the South Indian state of Tamil Nadu. He was born into an Hindu Orthodox family. His father's name was K. Srinivasa Iyengar and his mother was Kamalata Amar. About his school and college education, he went to school for the first time on 1st October 1892, and at the age of 12 he made his serious mathematical studies up and through arithmetic and geometric series and cubic equations, and he found his own equations to solve the quartic equations too, and at the age of 12 he was very good at trigonometry too. A synopsis in elementary results in pure and applied mathematics, acknowledged in Awakening the Genius in Ramanujan. This book was written by G.S. Khas, Pure and Applied Mathematics. It's a book written by G.S. Khas and it contains almost 5,000 theorems. And this book was given to Ramanujan at the age of 16, and he made serious studies on the content of this book. And he investigated about the Bernoulli number, and later in the year he independently calculated the Euler-Maclaurin constant up to 15 decimals. And about his college life, he received a scholarship to study at Government Arts College, Kumbakonam, and later in Pachayappa's College in Madras. But as he was so into mathematics, he failed in other subjects, thereby losing the scholarships, and in turn he failed to get a degree from both the colleges. But he continued to pursue independent research in mathematics, living in extreme poverty and often in the brink of starvation. About his marriage life, he married Srimati Janaki Amar on 14th July 1909, and she came from Rajendra, a small village close to Muradu. Research with Rao. When Ramanujan was trying to find a work at Government Revenue Department, there he met Sri Ramaswamy Iyer, and this Ramaswamy Iyer introduced him to Ramachandra Rao, assessee of the Indian Mathematical Society. And with the help of Ramachandra Rao, he continued his mathematical research, and Ramaswamy Iyer again published Mathematic Prodigy, and he considered Ramanujan as a mathematician of high quality, a man of altogether exceptional originality and power. And once working with Ramanujan, Littlewood, Hardy's collaborator, commented that he can believe that he is at least a Jacobi. Hearing this, Hardy replied that he can only be compared to Euler or Jacobi. Ramanujan spent nearly 5 years in Cambridge. Talking about Ramanujan, we should talk about his mentor, Hardy. Hardy himself was a prodigy from a young age. Just before the First World War, he made mathematics.
When Rose is joining, if there is time at last, we can continue with the presentation.
Thank you, Rose. May I now request Dr. Vijita Mugundan, our coordinator of the webinar, to introduce our speaker, Dr. Ashish Ashwadi from NIT Calicut, to our esteemed audience.
Good afternoon, one and all. Respected Principal, Dr. Sister Irene, Guest of Honor, Dr. Ashish Awasthi, Head of the Department, Ms. Smita Davis, my colleagues, faculties of various colleges, and my dear students. A hearty welcome to one and all. It's a moment of great pleasure, happiness, and honor for me to introduce before you my PhD supervisor and resource person of today's webinar, Dr. Ashish Awasthi. Let me give a formal introduction to Sir. Dr. Ashish Awasthi is an assistant professor in NIT Calicut. He obtained his PhD from IIT Kanpur under the guidance of Professor M.K. Kadal Baju. He did his postdoc in Upper Austria, University of Applied Sciences, Hagenberg, Austria. His areas of interest are numerical analysis, numerical solutions to ordinary and partial differential equations, differential algebraic equations, and singular perturbation problems. Apart from being an outstanding academician, he is a person of great human values, a person who is very simple, approachable, motivating, and a perfect research guide in all things. With huge respect and love, let me invite Dr. Ashish Awasthi to deliver a talk on the topic Singular Value Decomposition and its Applications. Over to you, sir.
Now I am unable to share the slide. Just make me a presenter.
Now it's okay.
Yeah. So first of all, I would like to thanks to organizers, special thanks to principal of the college, Dr. Arni, and head of the department, Dr. Smita, and my student, Dr. Vijita. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak a few words during the special occasion of this National Mathematics Day. And I really appreciate the effort of all of you in this direction, that you have organized a webinar, especially from the side of mathematics, on the special occasion of National Mathematics Day, though it was on 22nd December, but it's fine because of some issues you have shifted this to the 30th of December. So as already the presentation was very nice about our great mathematician Srinivasa Ramanujan, and he has done really a wonderful, remarkable work in the field of mathematics, and because of that, this Indian mathematics actually has a lot of what is called name in the international era. So now let me come to the today's point. So today I will be having a brief talk on singular value decomposition and its application. So this is actually a part of you can say that a linear algebra, and you can connect this one from the matrices, and this work actually, the singular value decomposition, I can say that it was also started in the late 18th century, late 18th century, at the time of birth of Ramanujan, Srinivasa Ramanujan. So in the beginning, when they started the work on singular value decomposition, so the intention was just to solve few problems. Not that it will go to the side of a matrices, or it is going to be a special direction application side. So it was just a work actually this word singular, I will tell you that it is inherited, or it was used from the theory of integral equations. So the theory of integral equations is quite pretty old, okay, in compared to the singular value decomposition. So the word singular inherited from the theory of integral equations. So here what I'm going to talk about, because I can see that the audience are there from various level. There are UG student, there are PG student, and a few faculty members are there. And so here I will be starting my this talk from the basic level, and then we will connect to the real application side. So is it visible to everybody? Is it visible? Is it visible to everyone, Vijita?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Okay, so let me start now. So I will talk about the basics. Actually, you know, the structure in mathematics. This is a very well-known structure in mathematics, and this is known as the matrix. Okay, so you see that the values here given in this particular set here, you see that the values are like this, that there is a A1 and there will be A12, A13, 1n. So these are arranged in a certain way, okay, and you can call this is a matrix, isn't it? So you please note that though this is an arrangement of numbers, but the position of the number is very important, you know that. Okay, so I would suggest that, you know, that if you want to understand the matrix, again it's a very simple structure, but it same time it is a very useful and informative structure, because the position of the element, position of the number is very important here. So suppose if you make little change in the, or you can swap any two numbers and their positions are going to be changed, and this will make a big difference. Okay, so this is a structure which is really a well-defined structure. So you can say that this is a matrix, and as you know that we call this part as the row, this part we call it is a row, and this part we call it is a column, right? Okay, so you know that this particular set of structure, it is known as the matrix, and if the number of rows is same as the number of columns, then we will call this particular structure as a square matrix. And generally we do write as a notation that suppose A is a matrix which has a m number of rows and m number of columns, and then we will represent that A m comma m. Okay, now if it is the case that where number of rows are different from the number of columns, then that particular structure, though it is a matrix, generally we refer that as a rectangular matrix, because it will take a shape of the rectangle. Okay, and these are the examples you can see from here, that square matrix and the rectangular matrix. This I have given like A and B. In A you can see that there are 3 rows 3 columns, while in B there are 3 rows and 2 columns. So you can say that the number differs, the structure differ. It will come from the square to the rectangular. Okay, now let us talk about the efficiency, or you can say that the specific things about the structure. So you may be thinking that only number of rows and number of columns differs, and what does it make sense actually? How does it will be affecting the structure? So now you see that the square matrix A said to be singular if the determinant of A is equals to 0. It's a very popular result, okay, in the matrices, especially for the square matrix. And if this is not equal to 0, then we will call them as a non-singular matrix. Now my question is that, what about the determinant of the rectangular matrix B? Right, you can look at the previous slide and see that the B is a structure where number of rows are different from the number of columns. So now my question is that, what is the determinant of that particular matrix? I think that many of you are getting my question. So this question actually is connected with the invertibility problem, because when a matrix is a square matrix, we can talk about singularity, that it is a singular or it is a non-singular matrix. In case if it is a non-singular matrix, we can talk about the inverse, okay, invertibility of the matrix. Now my question is that if you have a rectangular matrix where number of columns are different from the number of rows, okay, how you will talk about the invertibility of such a matrix. So for example, you see that suppose if I'm writing here, suppose if I'm writing a matrix A, if I'm taking suppose 2, 3, 4, and I'm writing 5, 6, 7, right? You look at this matrix. Now what about A inverse here? So you can see that these are the questions slowly I'm asking you, and at the end I will be answering about these questions. Though they are looking very simple, but they are very complicated. Now similar things, as you know that when we talk about the matrix, always associated with certain characteristic values, and they are referred as the eigenvalues. So eigenvalues of the matrix, okay, and it is given by the determinant of A minus lambda is equals to 0, and this particular parameter lambda, it is known as the eigenvalue of the matrix. Okay, now I'm again going to ask you the same question, that what is going to happen when the matrix becomes rectangular matrix? How can we talk about the eigenvalues of a matrix where number of rows and number of columns are different? Now similarly, talk about the invertibility, okay, for the rectangular matrix. Okay, so now two questions I have asked you. That one was that what is the eigenvalue? Another question I have asked about the determinant of the B, where B is the rectangular matrix. Okay, now I'm talking about the orthogonal matrix. A matrix is said to be the orthogonal if it satisfies the following inequality. For example, if you say that U, then U transpose is equals to U transpose U is equals to identity matrix. Now my question is that what is the difference between the orthogonal matrix and unitary matrix? I think that a simple question. I think anybody can answer that. If the matrix is real, we talk about the orthogonal word, or if it becomes a complex matrix, okay, orthogonal word is replaced by the unitary word. Okay, so now question comes that now we are moving towards the decomposition side, that now we have a matrix A, and now we want to decompose that particular matrix in a particular way so that we have a simpler form of the matrix. So now question comes that how can we say that this particular matrix is diagonalizable? Okay, or you can say that in particularly that how we can say that this particular matrix has eigenvalues decomposition. So decomposition word, actually, you know that the decomposition word is a very popular word actually in mathematics. Okay, now let me talk about the something which you are aware about that. For example, if you have an infinite series, right, you have infinitely many numbers. Now question is there that how you will find out the sum of infinitely many numbers. For example, if you take the series of e raised to power x, okay, you write the Maclaurin series, so you have infinitely many terms. How you are going to sum those infinitely many terms for a particular value of x, though from the theory you know that it is going to be a convergent, right? So you see that the answer is simple like that. You have to decompose means that you have to truncate here some point. So suppose you have a e raised to power x in terms of the Maclaurin series. You see that if you add, for example, 2 terms, you add 3 terms, you add 4 terms, you add 50 terms, and you will feel that there is a significant difference if you have a addition of 10 terms or if you have addition of 12 terms, for example. But if you go for 50 terms and the addition of 50 terms and the addition of 60 terms, you may feel that there's not much significant difference, isn't it? So you can say that that is enough if you can take 50 terms. So you see that you have infinitely many terms and you have infinite series, but practically when you go for the application side, you are not going to add all the terms. You are not going to add all the terms, but you are only adding the 50 terms and you are getting the e raised to power x for a particular value of x. And the same concept is used in our calculator or in our computers. So you see that rather than handling infinitely many terms, just you are handling the finitely many terms, isn't it? So that means this finitely many terms, isn't it, are enough to represent the infinitely many terms because remaining terms are almost or close to the zero. Isn't it? Same idea we are going to use here in the singular value decomposition or eigenvalue decomposition. So you see that here you see that we are going to decompose a matrix in terms of the simpler matrix. So suppose if you have a square matrix. So now please note that now I'm talking about that if you have a square matrix, okay, say that n cross n, and it is said to be a diagonalizable. It is there in the BSc syllabus everywhere, isn't it? You can see that if and only if A has n linearly independent eigenvectors. That is the basic definition of a matrix is a diagonalizable. Or you can say that in terms of the eigenvalues, that if it has real distinct eigenvalues, then it will be diagonalizable and so on. So other definition you can find out, or you can say that there will be a non-singular matrix P such that P inverse AP becomes D, or you can say that A can be represented as PDP inverse. That means the matrix A is similar to the matrix D. Now question comes that why do we need this actually? Why do we need the diagonalization of a matrix when the life becomes too already matrix is there? Why we will do the complications? Why we will decompose it and we will write the matrix A in terms of PDP inverse? Why it is so, isn't it? So as you know that if you look at the structure of the diagonal matrix, for example, let us say that here we call it is a D matrix. So now look at the D matrix. So you see that the D matrix here, it is there that it has only the diagonal elements, remaining are zero, guaranteed zero. There may be some element in the diagonal also, they are the zero, but off diagonal elements are zero. So you see that now, for example, if D is a n cross n matrix, total number of matrices elements are there n into n square. It's a huge data, right? But if you look at that here in the diagonal, because remainings are the zero matrix, zero numbers, only the diagonal elements would be the non-zero. So you see that maximum non-zero values you are going to handle, or the significant values you are going to handle, is the n. And there is a huge difference between n and n square when n is large. For example, n is, for example, 1000. Then you have a 1000 multiplied by 1000. That much element you have, right? Okay. And now you have only 1000 element. So you know that what the meaning of 1000 by 1000, right? So it is going to be 1 million, right? So you have a 1 million entries, and you have the entries only 1000. This is huge difference. So right, so A is having 1 million entries and D is having 1000 entries. So why not we work the 1000 entries? Why we will unnecessarily wasting our space, wasting our time to deal with the entries like 1 million, isn't it? So it's a quite significant thing that, so these things will come only when you can use certain things called the decomposition, isn't it? So here that is called the diagonalization, or you can say that it is an eigenvalue decomposition. Okay, so and you see that as far as theory is concerned, you see that A is similar to the diagonal matrix D. That means they are same in some sense. Okay, so it's a similar matrix. Of course, there is a theory behind that. Okay, so as you know that the construction of P is given by the eigenvectors of the corresponding eigenvalues and so on. Now, let me take the example A and see that how we'll find out a similar matrix D. Okay, so the first step is that you calculate the eigenvalues. Okay, here we have taken a simple example for the illustration that all are having different real eigenvalues and corresponding eigenvectors also. You can easily find it out. If you have a pen and paper, you can see that it will take only 10 minutes. And based on the eigenvectors, you can construct the matrix P. So P is nothing, if you see that the P is nothing, but this part of the P is your, you can see that this part of the P and this part of this. So you can say that this particular thing here, we can say that this thing. Okay, I think that there is a certain problem. Okay, so now the first line, it is called the V1. The second column is the V2 corresponding. The third one is for the corresponding to the V3. If you all together put it here, you will be getting P inverse. So this is your P inverse. This is your, you say that A, and this is your A, and this is your P. So finally, you are going to get the D. You are going to get the D. Okay, so you see that the construction of D is not that difficult. It is quite easy. Now you may say that what is the immediate benefit of doing this decomposition? So the immediate benefit is that you can find out the powers of the A, isn't it? And this is the immediate benefit of the decomposition. That is called that you can find out the powers of A. For example, if you are looking for the powers of A up to the K, then you see that AK is nothing but P D raised to power K P inverse, isn't it? Now question comes that what is the mean of D raised to power K? It is a very simple thing. This is the way actually we can calculate it. So this way you can easily find out that. So you see that if suppose you have the D matrix, and the D matrix, for example, it was 3, 2, 1, right? So if you want D power K, it is immediately, because it is a diagonal matrix, so you can say that this is the values here. So it is very easy, just in one line you can find out that D raised to power K. Now this you pre-multiply by P, you post-multiply by P inverse, you will get the A raised to power K, isn't it? Otherwise, you know that in the matrix theory, the most complicated thing is the matrix multiplication, isn't it? I don't know if you have written a code of multiplication of two matrices using C language, right? You see that how much time you are going to devote, isn't it? But here you see that, so you can find out A raised to power K. K could be any finite number, isn't it? 1000, 2000, whatever you want, you can put it, and you will get, with simple calculations, with very efficient way, these powers you can easily calculate by using, okay, the concept of the decomposition. Okay, so now I'm giving the example here. If you look at this particular example, and if you want to find out the power of M, okay, and that you can say that just this is a curiosity that you can generate the sequence that M could be like this, M square could be like this, M cube will be like this. This is follows one pattern, okay, and I'm not going to explain that, but it is very easy that this pattern, for example, if you write M raised to power 4, it will be A power 4, B power 4 minus A power 4 and B power 4. So you see that this will follow a pattern, and this can be defended. This can be proved by using just the concept of the diagonalization. So you see that the diagonalization is a very important and very useful techniques whenever we need the powers of a matrix. There are various other applications are there. It has a lot of applications in the quantum mechanical and quantum chemical computational matrix. Okay, and basically there is a problem is known as the Schrodinger equation, that is known as the eigenvalue problem. So there also the diagonalization theory comes in picture, and you can use that in various field of the physics. Okay, Schrodinger equation, because quantum means that it is connected somewhere with the Schrodinger equations. Okay, so this is something like that. When you have a matrix A, you can decompose in a simpler matrix, for example D, isn't it? In some sense, and you can say that these two are the similar matrices. So rather than working with the A, you can work with the D, and you can make the things in a much more easier way. Now question comes that I have given in the beginning itself that a matrix is the diagonalizable if and only if it has an linearly independent eigenvectors, which is really a difficult task. So you see that means that you cannot find the eigenvalue decomposition for any random matrix. For example, if you are performing an experiment, okay, and you got certain matrix, okay, or if you have some data, you can arrange the data in a certain pattern and you can say that this is going to be a matrix. Now you want to find a decomposition of that matrix in terms of the eigenvalue decomposition or in terms of the diagonal matrix. You see that you are not able to get it because there is a serious condition or there is a severe condition that D is the matrix will be diagonalizable if and only if it has n linearly independent eigenvectors, isn't it? So later on, people have realized that rather than using the eigenvalue decomposition, why not we go for the more generalized way? So the more generalized way, it is known as the singular value decomposition. So in many useful decompositions, there are a lot of decompositions are there. One of them is the singular value decomposition. So basically here, what is the decomposition actually? So again, it will have the three matrices like the previous case, U, sigma, and V transpose. And U and V are the orthogonal matrix, and sigma will be a kind of a diagonal matrix. So historically, the development of singular value decomposition is started by the 5 mathematicians. I would say that there are 5 people named here. So you see that, let me, now you see that there is a Beltrami, Jordan, Sylvester, Smith, and Weir. So now look at the first two. These two actually are the, you can say that pioneer people started the idea of decomposition. And you see that, you know, that in that olden days, you see that many of the theorems, they have the 2 people name. Many theorems are there, Horn-Banach theorem. Many theorems are there where 2 peoples are connected. Okay, sometimes you may feel that whether these 2 people has worked together or they have to work independently. So because there was no kind of a email, there was no kind of a communication like a Google, or you don't have a Science Direct so that you can see the research of other person, isn't it? So sometimes it happens that a person is working on a particular field, other person also working in the similar field, and they maybe come up with the same result. Same thing here happened. So you see that Beltrami and Jordan and all, they are working independently, and finally they got the similar results, isn't it? But the contribution is credited for both because they worked independently. They were not aware that Jordan was not aware that the same time Beltrami is working, and same thing with the Beltrami that Jordan worked. So these 2 people actually started their work for the singular value decomposition in connection with the integral equation. And later, because they were be too much what is called that oriented just to get the information or get the solution of the integral equations, nothing else. Same thing, you know that, have you heard the name of the Fourier series? Right. So you may say that the Fourier has invented the series and he has given all the application of the Fourier. Nothing like that. The Fourier actually, you know that Joseph Fourier, basically he was a physicist, and he was actually doing some experiment, and he ended up with the theoretical results known as the heat equation. And he were intended, or he were looking for the solution of the heat equation, and he was not able to find that how to get the proper mathematical formulation for the heat equation, solution of the heat equation. Then he started that why not we think about the infinite series in terms of the sine and cosine, and finally he got the idea that you can use this particular infinite series to get the solution of the heat equation. So you see that he was not solving a partial differential equation. In his mind, it was not there that I'm solving a partial differential, because the problem was different. Actually. It was related to physics. Finally, he got the result, and the result is known as the Fourier series. Same thing here. They have done the decomposition not for the matrix purpose. They have done the decomposition just for the solving an integral equation. So the Veltroni and Jordan, they have started the work for singular value decomposition in connection with the integral equation. Later on, the Sylvester, actually, you can say that in many books they will say that the Sylvester actually contributed a lot, because Sylvester started the work on the matrices actually, and he has started the singular value decomposition for the square matrices, and he tried to get the decomposition only for the square. And later on, this is Smith and Weil, they are also started with the same time for the matrices. Okay, so you can say that the basically the theory developed by Sylvester in 1889 for the real square matrix. Okay, and later it was extended for the complex system, and then there is a theory by Eckhart and Young. They have extended the work from the square matrix to the rectangular matrices. And I'll talk about the application little later. Okay, so you see that you can say that the Sylvester is the pioneer person actually who started the work of singular value decomposition. In short form, it is known as SVD for the square as well as for the rectangular matrix. So you see that now, which was a barrier. The barrier was that a matrix should be square, first of all. Second barrier was that it should have n linearly independent eigen vectors. Then only we can think about the decomposition. Okay, you can say that before Sylvester. But they came out with the result that no need of a square matrix, no need of that n linearly independent eigenvector. Any matrix, it could be a square or rectangular, can be decomposed in terms of the simpler matrices. So you see that they have already removed the serious or severe restrictions of being like a number of rows should be same as the number of columns. One restriction. Second is that it should have a particular structure, should have the and linearly independent eigenvectors. So all barriers has been removed. Just you give a matrix, you see that you will have a decomposition. You give a matrix, you have a decomposition. Okay, so it is called, you see that you can say that this is more liberal in a certain sense, right? So it's something like that. I can connect that. I think especially the student may not aware, but maybe faculty are knowing it, that if you look at the before 2010 2000, you can say 8 or 9 times, isn't it? It was very difficult to have internet in every house or something like that. Mostly people were going for the cafe. Suppose if you send an email or some documents, you will go to the cafe and you will use there, and you have to pay something on based on the timings and all. So you see that the reach of the internet was not that common to the each and every person. So you see that there were the restrictions that you have to go to internet, you have to wait in the queue. They will ask you your ID proof and so many things, so many questions. Then they will log in it. You will have certain period or certain time that only you have to access the internet, and when time is over, they will say that you please go out because other person in the queue. So you see that it was very difficult to use internet. Now you see that today's scenario, it's more liberal. Everybody have it. Similarly, there actually decomposition was there before Sylvester also, but it was limited, because it was limited only for the matrix which have you can say that the luxury of having n linearly independent eigenvectors. Those only will be diagonalizable, remaining will be useless kind of things. But nowadays you see that after Sylvester and this Eckhart and Young, you see that you just give any matrix. It could be square, it could be rectangular. We can easily decompose it. And the decomposition has a lot of applications. So few of them I'm going to explain here. So let us understand that what is the decomposition. So you see that if you have a real matrix, I'm talking about in this particular presentation, I'm talking about the real matrix, not on the complex form. Okay, here this assumption has to be there that M should be greater than or equal to n, right? So this is a assumption which is useful actually. In case suppose if you have a matrix where you don't have m greater than or equal to n, okay, m means number of rows and n means number of columns. So number of rows are more than the number of columns, then we can find out the SVD. You don't think that, but I told you that SVD is so liberal. You don't think. If suppose if you have m less than n, for example, don't worry. That means that you have less number of rows than the columns. Columns are more, rows are less. Don't worry. Just to rather than using A, you just use A transpose. You write a matrix B, you take a matrix B is equals to A transpose. So you see that once you transpose it, automatically number of rows will be more than the number of columns. So that's what actually this is going to be a very liberal thing. So look at here, this particular part. If you look at this particular part, U transpose AV is equals to the sigma. Okay. Now this sigma actually, it is actually a special type of a matrix. You can say that. Is a diagonal rectangular form of order m cross n. So it is a special type of matrix. Actually, it is not the purely diagonal for a journal m cross n. It is something like that, sigma 1 and the 0. Okay, sigma 1 is a diagonal matrix and the null matrix given there, O, you can say that the null matrix is given below to the diagonal matrix. So this is the structure of the this sigma matrix. Okay. So now look at the sigma 1 matrix structure. It will contains the elements in the diagonal form, isn't it? So it is a kind of a diagonal matrix. Remaining part is 0. But you see that the entries here are sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma 3 and all. You may ask a question that what is the meaning of this sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma n? So basically they are known as the singular values of A. Please note here. This is the important point. Please note that these are the singular values of A. Now question comes that how can we calculate these singular values like sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma n, okay, and how we can calculate this U transpose or V, isn't it? So now we are going to talk about that. So you try to understand that the sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma n all are known as the singular values of A. Now question comes that what is the meaning of the singular values? Okay, so again, you please note that this is again a very interesting thing, that because if you have that A matrix, for example, okay, this is your M cross N matrix. Okay, now you see that if you pre-multiply A with the A transpose, for example, okay, if you multiply by A transpose, so you see that it is difficult for me to write actually, just okay, so it may be easy for me to write now. So let me take. So you see that here it is A, it is transpose A. Okay, so A is your, you can say that M cross N, and this is actually A transpose. Okay, A transpose. So you can say that N cross M. So finally you have A transpose A. Finally it is N cross N. So you see that the A transpose A becomes a square matrix, because in the beginning I have already told you that you can think about the sorry, I think now we have to go to the slides, right? Just a moment, I think I lost it, so I need to go. Okay, so now you see that the A transpose A becomes the square matrix. So I told you that we can talk about the eigenvalues, we can talk about the determinant only for the square matrix, isn't it? So the original matrix A, which is not the square matrix, but somehow by using the concept by pre-multiplied by the A transpose, we converted that to the square matrix. So A transpose A becomes the square matrix. You find out the eigenvalues of that particular matrix. Okay, take the square root of that. That is the definition of the singular values. Take the square root of that. But when you take the square root, for example, the 4 is the eigenvalue of A transpose A. If you take the square roots, so you have two answers. One is +2, another is -2. Please note that. So I'm telling you that if lambda is the eigenvalue of A transpose A, isn't it? Then the square root of lambda will be called the singular value of singular value of A. So my question is that suppose if 4 is the eigenvalue of A transpose A, what could be the singular values of A transpose A? What will be the singular value of A? The square root of 4. So you can say that the square root of 4 could be +2 or -2. Isn't it? So the definition is there that you take the positive square root. Okay, so that is the definition of the singular value. Singular values are always positive. So take the positive square root of the eigenvalue of A transpose A, and that will be your singular values. Okay, and now those singular values, you just arrange in a decreasing order. That means first one you give the highest value, then the lower one. So you can say that the sigma 1 is greater than or equal to sigma 2, and last one is the sigma n is the least, sigma 1 is the highest. Okay, so this order you have to retain because that pattern is very important for next analysis. Okay, so sigma 1 is the highest one, the sigma n is the lowest one. Fine. Now question comes, how you will get the U matrix or how you will get the V matrix. So you see that the answer is given in a very simpler way, that the A matrix, U matrix is nothing but the eigen vectors of, you please note that I think some mistake I have made. No, it is fine. The eigen vectors of A transpose, and the V matrix is the eigen vectors of A transpose A. This is important. Okay, so you please note that the second one is the V is the eigenvectors of A transpose A, and the U can be treated as the eigenvectors of A transpose. Okay, for that you may ask that how it has come. That for that at least I need 1.5 hour theory to explain about this, that how we can get these particular things, isn't it? Fine. So now let me take but one simple example, and you see that how we can calculate the SVD. So suppose you take this one. So first of all, you look at the matrix. There are 3 rows, there are 2 columns. So the assumption m greater than or equal to n is followed here. Now you make a matrix. Just I gave the name as a W. A transpose A. Now it becomes the square matrix. Okay, this is a simple example. Now find out the eigenvalues of this particular square matrix. You see that you just use the concept of the eigenvalues. So you will get the eigenvalues like 4 and 0. Okay, and you please note that since A transpose A is always a positive semi-definite matrix, the eigenvalues is always greater than or equal to 0. So you don't have any difficulty in finding the square root. Okay, so you can find out the square root, and the square root is here 2 and 0. So now question comes that which one will be the sigma 1. So sigma 1 will be the largest one, isn't it? So the largest here it is 2, numerical value 2. Okay, but anyway it is positive, so always it is like this. So sigma 1 is 2, sigma 2 is 0. Okay, and with this particular lambda you can calculate the V vector. Okay, and by the help of the V vector you can calculate the U vector. Please note that when you calculate the V vector, these are the orthogonal matrix, but I have not written actually. Practically this should be orthogonal as well as the column should be the orthonormal. So these all should be the unit vectors. So that's what we have here, make them as the unit vectors. So you see that you can easily find out the values of V1 and V2 corresponding to the lambda 1 4 and lambda 2 0. You can get the V1 V2. With the help of the V1 V2 you can use a formula that comes from the previous theorem. U1 is equals to 1 by sigma A V1, you can find out the U1, and then you can find out the U2, you can find out the U3. Okay, here you can use the concept of AA transpose. Both the ways you can do that. Okay, so here you see that I have linked in a, sorry, in a both the ways. So now you can have a look on this. So you can find out U1, you can find out U2, you can find out U3. So now you have V1, V2, you have a U1, U2. So now look at this structure actually. So this is your A matrix. So now I can say that this is your A matrix, and this is your, this particular matrix, you can say that this is your yes, this is your basically V matrix, right? And this is your sigma 1. This is, sorry, this is your sigma. I'm unable to write actually here. This is your sigma matrix, and then the last one you have the, so you can say that this is your U, this is your sigma, this is your V transpose. I'm unable to write, so this is your U, and this is your actually sigma, and this is your V. V transpose, sorry, V transpose, you can write V transpose, V transpose. So you have this, and now you see that based on that you have certain benefits that you can easily find it out. The now let me take all the things here. So you see that, oh, now you look at this particular here, you see that you have the range here. Range is given here. This vector will be the range, this vector will be the null. You can see that. Okay, this is the null space of A, this is the range space of A, and the rank of A. So you see that if you write the SVD, three things you can easily find it out, that what is the range of A, what is the null space of A, what is the rank of A. So the idea here is that look at the sigma matrix, look at the non-zero singular values. So all the non-zero singular values, suppose if it has a one non-zero singular values, the rank of this will be defined through that. Okay, now here actually it should be one. I think this is the mistake I have wrote here. It should be the one. Sorry, this should be the one. I have written wrong here. Rank should be the one. Okay, and you can find out the range space, you can find out the null space. Anyway, and if you use MATLAB, you just use the simple command. You just write U comma S comma V. Okay, okay, is equals to SVD of A. Just to one line command you write, you will get the information about the U, you will get the information about the S, you will get the information about the V. Okay, so now look at this actually in the general form, how this is working. This is your A matrix, this is your U matrix. So you see that remaining part I did not write here. I have written sigma 1 to sigma R by assuming that there are R non-zero singular values of a matrix depending on the rank of the matrix. Suppose the rank is R, it has R non-zero independent R non-zero singular values, and right hand side is the V transpose. These all things together you can write in terms of the matrix. So the matrix can be decomposed in terms of the U, in terms of the sigma, in terms of the V. Okay, so now let me compare these two, that what is the difference between the SVD and the diagonalization. So SVD, singular value decomposition, A can be written as U sigma V transpose. There also it is same like V T D V inverse, isn't it? And here you see that only thing is that U and V should be the orthogonal, and here P should be invertible. Okay, that means that the eigenvectors should be the linearly independent. Then only we can talk about the invertibility. Okay, and the important thing is the last line. If you look at the last line, okay, you can get the idea that the last line is telling that the SVD is applicable for all matrices, while this eigenvalue decomposition is applicable only for the square matrix. Even though it will not be applicable for all square matrix, it will be applicable only limited square matrices which have linearly, or you can say that which have, for example, if it is a n cross n, it should have n linearly independent eigen vectors. So only diagonalizable matrices will have eigenvalue decomposition, while singular value decomposition is there for all sort of the matrices. Okay, so this is the actually this example which I have given already to you, that so here you can say that the rank of the matrix A also can be calculated by using the SVD that comes from the non-zero singular values. The range of the matrix is the left singular vectors, and the null space also you can find out from the singular vector of V. Okay, so from there you can find out the range and null space as well as the rank of the matrix by using SVD. This is the rank. I have written wrong, actually it should be 1. Okay, now second thing is that I don't know whether you are aware about that or not. It also talk about the condition number of a matrix, okay, because it will give you the singular values, and it will talk about the condition number of a matrix, okay, like it is a ill condition matrix or well condition matrix. This is a separate theory that can be used to calculate the condition number of a matrix. Okay, now this is the important point here, that this is again another application that it will give you the optimal low rank approximation of arbitrary matrix. So suppose if you have a matrix A, okay, and now you want to approximate that, or you want to find out a lower rank matrix, okay, so lower rank matrix if you are looking for, then what is the difference, what is the error between the matrix A and its lower rank? For example, if A is a matrix, suppose if it has the rank R, okay, then what is going to happen, that if you are going to consider a matrix whose rank is less than R, it could be A rank is R minus 1 or R minus 2. If it is the case, then what is the difference between these two? What is the error between this approximation? This happens actually in many places. When you have a high rank matrix, but we don't want to use the high rank matrix, we want the lower rank matrix, but we want that the lower rank matrix should be similar to the high rank matrix, isn't it? So there you can use the concept of SVD. You can use the concept of SVD. Here you see that this is the approximation is given here. It is especially if you look at the second point here, it is telling that the approximation of A to B, I have considered this approximation in two norms. One is called the Frobenius norm, another is called the two norms. So this will tell about the error in the approximation, isn't it? So this I have explained in a simpler way, that for example, if you take this particular matrix A, now if you write the SVD, just this I have done through the MATLAB actually. Just in one line you can get the SVD of A, and then this SVD of A, if you look at that, you can find out the rank. So you see that A is the rank deficient, and this is actually 2, because A, as you look at here, this is actually A is the 3 by 3 matrix, but the rank is 2, isn't it? Okay, so now we want to find out a matrix which has the rank less than 2. So let us take that the B is a matrix which has the rank 1, isn't it? And the difference between A and B, which is given by the sigma 2 by this particular result. Okay, look at the previous result. Okay, look at this particular result, and you see that this particular result here, that rank of B is less than or equal to mu, and here you see that A minus B, norm 2 is equals to norm of A minus A mu is equals to sigma mu plus 1. So you see that you are getting this much error. So now if A is a rank 2 matrix, if you want to approximate this with the lower rank matrix, isn't it? Say if it is a B, isn't it? Then the error will be maximum, the error will be the 3.5. That's only the error. Now question comes that what is the use of this? This technique of SVD is highly used in image processing, actually, especially the face recognition. So suppose there is a face recognition technique where you have the original picture, okay, say suppose A, right? You want to map, or you have another picture, suppose B, isn't it? And these two picture you write in the matrix forms, try to match them in the same rank. If it is not, go for the use of this optimal low rank approximation, and see that if the error is something in terms of the singular values, you can say that they are the matching, or this is the approximation, this image is the approximation of the another image. So in that way, this particular concept is used in image processing. Another major application of SVD is there in the compression. Okay, this compression actually is used in two ways. One is image processing, another is the speech. So you see that if you have a high pixel image, if you write that image in terms of the matrix, okay, so you just write in terms of the matrix that particular image, then write the SVD of that matrix. Okay, so you see that the SVD can be written like this. Okay, if you do little calculation, you see that the SVD can be written as A is equals to sigma R I is equals to 1 to R sigma I VI transpose. Okay, and the right hand side, it is nothing but the simple summation of all rank 1 matrices. So you see that each term here, there are R term in the right hand side, each term is the rank 1 matrix. Okay, so it is a, like, suppose R is very large. Okay, so there large, many terms are there, but here each term is only the 1 rank matrix. So suppose if you have a and you are written like that, so you see that in practical, when you have an image, when you find out the image in terms of the matrix, you see that calculate the SVD of that, lot of singular values in that particular SVD, you will see that are close to 0. So whatever the terms are here, you see that whatever the terms are here, okay, whatever the terms are here, let me see here that there are R terms, isn't it? So suppose R is, for example, 100. So you see that 100 terms are there, but out of 100 singular values, only 10 singular values are significant. Remaining 90 singular values are very close to 0. So you don't have to write all 100 terms, you just take the 10 terms. So you see that you have a big matrix, but here you are getting only 10 low rank matrix, say 1 rank matrix, only 10 terms, isn't it? So just use that 10 terms, it will represent the original image. So you can say that you have compressed the image by using the SVD, So it could be like, if you have only one term, then it will be like sigma 1 U1 V transpose. If you have 2 terms, then sum of 2 terms, and so on. Okay, this is about the, suppose if it has a mu terms like that. Okay, so now this is the actually reduced form of the SVD. So you see that why I have written here. So you see that now in the sigma part, if you look at that, the bottom of this matrix, that all are 0 elements, right? So if you multiply 0 element to the U, it will have no effect. So finally, rather than using sigma, you can use sigma hat. Rather than using, you can use U hat. So that means that the unnecessarily values which are creating only computations but result is 0, you can avoid that, and that is known as the reduced SVD. So rather than using U, you can use U hat. Rather than using sigma, you use sigma hat, and V, same you have to use, because that is already compressed. Okay, so now let me take the example. Here you can see the use of this compression. So for example, this satellite image, suppose a satellite take a picture and wants to send it to the earth. Okay, it contains, suppose 1000 by 1000 pixels. So you see that 1000 by 1000 pixel means you are going to handle roughly at 1 million numbers. Okay, so for example, this picture, if you represent this picture in terms of the matrix, okay, and now look at this. Okay, so it is better to essential information in 1000 by 1000 matrix, so send only in terms of the SVD. Okay, so find out the singular values, and you found that there are only few singular values are of our interest, isn't it? So you see that suppose 1000 by 1000 matrix is there, isn't it? It's a square matrix actually. Now find out the singular values. So maximum singular values may be 1000, right? But out of 1000 values, suppose only 60 values are useful. That means they are significant and remaining are close to the zero. So you just discard that 940 values. You just discard the 940 values. Same thing that corresponding U and V, you are going to use only 60 columns. There are 1000 columns in U and V, isn't it? So out of 1000 column, you are going to use only 60 columns. You see that how much less information is required actually, and remaining information you can just throw it away. Okay, so rather than finding the low rank matrix, you can say that the first term is a one rank matrix, second term is a one rank matrix. So suppose R is 100, 1000 here. So rather than using 1000, just use the 60. Okay, so now let me take the example here. It is actually, it is given in the book of Strong, as well as it is performed by, this name is there actually, it is done by somebody else. I have not done that part, just I have copy paste. Look at this. So you see that the original image here in the right side corner, isn't it? And you write that original image in terms of the matrix pixel. Find out the SVD. That means you find out the sigma 1, you find out the sigma 2, you find out the sigma 3, you find out so on. So they have found only 8 sigma values. Okay, so sigma 8, and then they calculated each term, sigma 1 U1 V1 transpose, sigma 2 U2 V2 transpose, and so on till sigma 8 U8 V8 transpose. Only 8 pictures, 8 terms they have calculated, and they have simulated it. And then they have used this technique. The first approximation, they have taken the first term. Second approximation, sum of the two terms. So A2 means that it is a partial term, partial sum of the two terms. So you see that you take the two terms, sigma 1 U1 V1 transpose plus sigma 2 U2 V2 transpose. You add these two, you will get A2, A3, A4. Similarly, if you do it, you will be seeing that once you do the all 8 term summations, you see that the A8 picture is very similar like the original picture. So you see that you have a matrix which has suppose 1000 value. Just to take the 8 values, and you see that you have reconstructed the picture just by considering only 8 terms. So you have taken 8 rank 1 matrices. So rather than handling all big matrix, just you have taken 8 rank 1 matrices and you have reconstructed the picture, isn't it? That is the major application of the SVD. Same thing can be done for the speech. Suppose voice is there, you can always compress it, make in a low bytes, okay, just by using SVD. So that means that unwanted data you have to remove. Otherwise, that from the unwanted data, if something is significant, that also you can extract. That is the beauty of the SVD. So SVD is something like that. You can find the important information from the least information, which is totally neglected part. Okay, so these all things can be done very easily by using the image processing toolbox in the MATLAB. Okay, so you see that actually the major work is done here. Whatever given, it is there in the textbook by Trefethen, and then there is a work by the very important work by the Golub. Golub has done actually a lot of information, has given it, he has a book actually, it's a numerical analysis book. He has explained each and every component of SVD in a very nice way, okay, in his work. So after that only SVD becomes popular. You see that these people, Sylvester, Beltrami, Jordan, they have done long back work and they left it, isn't it? And it was in the somewhere in the cool box, and then somebody came like a Golub and they have taken out the work and they found that it has enormous application, and then after that it becomes popular. Okay, the next application, that is the last part. Okay, just let me finish it. That it is called the pseudo inverse of the matrix. This is the another application of the SVD. So I gave you the question in the beginning that suppose if you have a rectangular matrix, how you will find out the inverse of the matrix? Or if you have a matrix, actually suppose if you have a square matrix and if it is a singular matrix, that means the determinant of the matrix is 0, how can we talk about the inverse of that matrix? These two questions, please note that. One is that if number of columns and number of rows are different, how you will find out the inverse. Second question is that if the determinant of the matrix is equal to 0, not equal to 0, not equal to 0, how you will find out the matrix? That means that you have a matrix, isn't it? How you will find out the inverse of that matrix? That means that now we are ensuring that every matrix shall be invertible. How? So the idea is, again, it's quite old only. It has been given by the two people. One is, let me reveal the name here. You see that E.H. Murray, 1920. And then another one is, I think many of you are aware about this photograph, isn't it? Roger Penrose. So he has done in 1920 Murray, and 1955 Roger Penrose has done the similar work. Again, they have done independently, isn't it? So they have find out the, or they have worked over the pseudo inverse of a matrix. Roger Penrose, and in 1955. And this fellow, actually, Roger Penrose, he's a great mathematician from the physicist, actually, from the Oxford University, and this year he got the Nobel Prize in Physics. Okay, especially the discoveries of black holes. I'm not aware much about that, but he got the Nobel Prize. So you see that he has given a idea of inverse of any matrix. Okay, and that particular inverse is called the name is pseudo inverse. Okay, and nowadays it is also known as the Murray-Penrose inverse because the contribution is by the Murray and the Penrose. So they have given the idea from the system, actually. So let me take all the things together and then you will have an interesting thing here. So for example, if you have a system AX equal to B, for example, n equations and unknowns, right? And we will say that it has a unique solution if A is invertible, that is given by the A inverse B. Now question comes that when they are not the same, they have a rectangular matrix, that means the number of equations are different from the number of unknowns. Okay, especially that if you have number of equations are more than the number of unknowns, isn't it? It may lead to the no solution because this becomes the overdetermined system. This is very complicated problem and very practical problem, actually. When you have a two constraint, people who are working in the physics, they are aware about that. They in the quantum physics, actually, they have the such type of the problems. They have a what is called several constraint only with the two variables, isn't it? So they are struggling to get the solutions, isn't it? Because mathematically, if you look at the theory, there is no solution, isn't it? So in that case, Murray, Penrose, and these people have suggested that why not we look for the another way? There is no solution, that is fine. Why not look at that? Suppose you are solving AX equal to B. So let us see that we cannot get B minus AX is equals to 0, but see that you find out the value of X, which will minimize the value of B minus AX. So you see that this is again one kind of, you said that this is a liberal thinking. When we think about the solution, we will always say that it's perfectly should be satisfied, isn't it? But this is the liberal way, that if it is not perfectly satisfied, if it is a closely satisfied, also be a solution, isn't it? So that is called here the least square solution. So they thought that rather than getting B minus AX equal to 0, forget about the 0, you cannot get because it has no solution. Why not we go for B minus AX in a minimum sense, isn't it? So they found that you find out the value of X in such a way that the residual, here it is defined, that is nothing but the B minus AX, which becomes very, very small, isn't it? And for such value of the X, whatever you have right hand side, you can call that as a pseudo inverse. So the pseudo inverse is defined that A is the pseudo inverse of the given A, okay, in terms of the least square. So that means that you are finding ax equal to b in such a way that you have to get the x value so that this b minus ax is minimum. It is not 0, it is minimum, isn't it? So it is very liberal thinking that, and they call that it is a pseudo inverse. And this, it is a kind of a revolutionary work in the theory of, I told you, that in the theory of, especially in quantum mechanics and all, isn't it? Because they have several constraints and they will be having always overdetermined system. So at least they got the idea about the solution, and it is working, practically it is working. Okay, later on, it was fine actually, and people were finding the pseudo inverse by using the technique of the least square. But later Murray Penrose, or you can say that this actually these two people worked independently and given they have given certain condition that if any matrix will follow the certain conditions, is called the pseudo inverse or generalized inverse of the matrix. Okay, so they have given the four conditions. Here it is written that, and this I have represented like the pseudo inverse of A by A dagger. Okay, this is the dagger actually, DA double GER. So A dagger is the representation. Some books may write in the form of the cross. It is fine. Okay, so if any matrix A dagger satisfies the following four property, and these properties are known as the, or conditions are known as the Murray-Penrose condition, then it is a Murray-Penrose inverse or pseudo inverse or generalized inverse. Three names are there. Murray-Penrose inverse, it is called pseudo inverse. It is also known as the generalized inverse. And you see that then pretty good thing is that it theoretically it is very difficult to get such a matrix. Actually you have to do a lot of work, but again the solution is given by the SVD. So as SVD becomes so popular to get the pseudo inverse for any matrix, okay, because two things are there. Any matrix have the generalized or pseudo inverse, any matrix has the SVD. So these two are connected. So you just to write that SVD of a matrix, you see that. So you just to write the SVD of the matrix. So suppose A U sigma V transpose is the SVD of the matrix. Okay, find out the generalized inverse. So you see that the generalized inverse becomes the inverse whenever it is a square matrix. Whenever it is not the square matrix, it is a generalized inverse. So that concept is used, and finally they got that the A dagger is nothing but V sigma transpose U transpose, isn't it? Because U and V are the orthogonal matrix. So this is one plus point, that because you know that they are the rectangular matrix. Oh, sorry, the U and V are the square matrix, and in a square matrix, orthogonality means that they are inverse to each other. U is inverse of U will be U transpose, or inverse of U transpose will be the U. In that way they found out. So this is the example. If you look at this example here, and you find out the SVD, and again you please note that you cannot get SVD directly, because here number of rows are more than the number of columns, isn't it? Work with the A transpose and then you do it. Okay, so that's what we have done here. We got here U, we got S, and we got the V. Calculate the sigma dagger, found the sigma dagger, and put the value of the sigma dagger here. You have the Murray-Penrose inverse, or it is known as the generalized inverse. So you see that in 5 lines you got the inverse of a rectangular matrix by using SVD, isn't it? And one can easily verify this inverse in MATLAB. There is a command for Murray-Penrose inverse or Penrose inverse. They have used the word PINV of A. If you just type this, okay, in the MATLAB command window, okay, give the matrix, it will give you the generalized Murray-Penrose inverse. So like that they have done it. Okay, so these are the references that I have used for this presentation. Okay, there are again many things are there. Even though I can talk about more about the face recognition by using SVD and so on. A lot of applications are there, but time is limited. Okay, and I'm not sure that you are aware about the norm of a matrix and all. So those things are there. One has to learn it, but it is a kind of a very interesting area, SVD, and highly useful, especially if those are working in the field of physics as well as in the especially engineering. Okay, those are image processing and all. They are using this SVD a lot. So these are the references which I have used. You look at the first book actually, Trefton. It's a very good book of numerical linear algebra. So this is from my side. If you have any question or anything, you please ask.
So participants can ask any questions if you have. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, sir. So good evening, all of you. Respected Principal Dr. Sister Irene, Professor Ashish Awasthi, Ms. Smita Davis, Ms. Vijita Mukundan, dear colleagues, and all the participants who eagerly joined us today for the program. Thanking first the Creator for graciously letting us shape up this program. Words of gratitude to our dear Principal, Dr. Sister Irene, for always giving the strong support in the planning and the execution of any program we think of. I heartfully thank Professor Ashish Awasthi for welcoming our invitation for the day and enlightening us with a natural and the new notion on whether we can associate determinants, inverses, and eigenvalues for rectangular matrices, and then moving on to the singular decomposition. I thank our head, Ms. Smita Davis, for gelling our team of colleagues and being of all the help during the coordination. No words of love and respect are enough to describe the dedication and efficiency of Ms. Vijita Mukundan. She always has during the conduct of this program, and I'm truthfully lucky for being handpicked to work with her as a team many times. I thank all our dear colleagues for the timely assistance and help, and that definitely gives the ease to conduct any program along with them. I thank our mathematics postgraduate students for their efforts in learning about Ramanujan and sharing the same with us, and for all the assistants. On behalf of SHC Mathematics family, I thank all the participants for being with us on this webinar. Thank you all. Thank you so much.
So thank you, and congratulate all the members. Okay, and I really appreciate the efforts of your whole mathematics department. And of course, I would suggest that you can make a collaboration between your department and some other department, like even in our department also, and work together for mathematics.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, nice. Thank you.
Session.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for giving your valuable insights on topic singular value decomposition and its applications.
Thank you.
The link for the feedback form and certificate form are posted in the chat box. Kindly please fill them. I wish this string of feeds be never ending. Thanking you, everyone.